Welcome to our media briefing. This is the last week of the legislative session. Hooray! We'll start with questions from the media.
So let's talk about the food tax.
Okay.
What's that bill going to look like when it finally comes out today?
It's going to lower the rate and broaden the base by restoring the food into the base.
I understand that you're not able to isolate some food items as basic necessities in this legislation. You're just going to have to restore the food tax on
Completely.
all items.
Mhm.
Okay.
I think that's where we're at this point. And then there's a groceries tax credit in the income tax to help those. And this is where I think we should have gone in 2007. Instead of giving everybody that and lowering the base, we should have, because not everybody is challenged in paying their food tax. It's the lowest of income, and so the grocery tax credit will help. It's a refundable credit, will help those who are actually buying food and paying that sales tax on that food.
What's the rate that you're going to do the food tax at?
The food tax comes up to the same rate as the statewide sales tax rate.
Which is?
It's close to 4.4%, I think. We're still working.
And that includes local option, right? Or
that's still being determined.
okay.
With the
Local option is still up in the
option,
6% range, isn't it?
Yeah, that gets you to about
Local
6.85%.
does the legislature have the ability to lower a local option tax once it's in place, or is that at the local entity?
No, we put it in place. We could adjust it. Now there's some question that has been brought up today is, have they bonded on that revenue stream? And is that even possible for us to do? So that's what we're checking into. There's a few unknowns we're trying to figure out right now.
How do you think this is going to, do you think you have support of the Senate to pass this?
We're taking it to caucus today.
Okay, and how do you think if it passes the Senate, how do you think it's going to do in the House?
It's most of what I think we've come up with has been run by the House caucus, so they seem good with it.
And it'll start over in the House.
We're thinking about having it start over in the House.
How do you feel about the way this worked out? You had a much larger plan initially with dealing with income tax as well. And now this is narrower, and it also has those credits against the income tax that I know there was some concern about that, narrowing that base.
Yeah, but in a way, I've actually struggled with that a little bit. But as I've thought about it, we're actually shifting money into the general fund and stabilizing that revenue stream, which is a good thing. And I think that as long as we spend that money now on higher ed that's generated there, the credits and all that type of thing, we're still finding out what that amount is. But as long as that's done on higher ed, there won't be a reduction in income to public ed just because we can move higher ed in and out of the education fund. So I think it's going to be kind of neutral to all those entities that have interest in education fund and general fund. It just now bolsters the general fund, which is one of the objectives in tax reform.
Any idea how, it's revenue neutral the first year by intent, but beyond that, any idea how much it'll raise?
I haven't seen a fiscal note on it.
Okay. And would the minority leader like to comment on this?
Well, I walked in not knowing all of the details, the latest details,
Right.
but sales tax back on food, I'm opposed to, and I think our caucus is. I think it's a fundamental thing, even with tax credits. You have to remember there's a lot of individuals that aren't, because of their income level, are advantaged by by being able to buy food without the tax on it or a lower tax on it. And they probably don't pay an income tax, so the credit means nothing to them.
But
Unless
this,
they're filed.
but this is refundable.
Refundable,
So you can get a tax refund even if you don't pay tax.
okay.
But you
So-
still have to file, right?
You still have
You
to
have to
file.
file to be able to get that credit.
Okay, because that's one of the concerns, right, is a lot of low-income people just don't have means to
Well-
figure out how to file for these things.
Does this mean that they have to keep all of their sales receipts to collect at the end of the year to prove, or?
No, it's based
They get
on, it's based on a chart.
On a chart?
Mm-hmm.
Okay. That's interesting.
And do we know what the income level is for that at this point?
It's gonna be a percentage of federal poverty level.
So I just need to be clear.
This is taxes, right?
This is a lot of numbers. So you're raising the food tax to 4.4. What are you lowering income and sales tax to then as part of this?
We're
whole-
not doing anything with the income tax rate.
Okay,
The sales tax rate is gonna be the same across the board. The state portion will be around the 4.4%.
okay. So food tax comes up to the rate of
That's
sales
correct.
tax, and then income tax remains where it is.
Right.
Does sales
With-
tax get cut? Or does it stay at the level it's at right now?
It'll be actually, it will be a little bit of a cut because we're increasing money through the,
So in other words, it's still revenue neutral, it's not addressing the problem.
actually,
that
it's actually gonna be a little bit more because we gotta pay for I got it backwards.
Okay.
It's easy to get backwards,
Excuse
by the
me.
way. So, the income tax rate is gonna be a little bit of, the grocery tax is a little bit of a cut in revenue there. It'll be made up in this, so inside the general fund, it's not revenue neutral. It's gonna be whatever we need to make up the difference in the income tax.
So I'm
But then again,
confused then,
yeah.
what, does the general sales tax rate go up from 4.7 then to make up that difference?
No, it's around this 4.4%. With a positive revenue stream in the sales tax base, but yet we're lowering the income tax by the same amount.
So you are lowering the income tax.
Not
you
the
just-
rate, this is a credit.
Okay.
So it's less
Will be-
revenue to, through the income tax. All right, so let's start
Will be-
over again.
Yes, please.
Okay. Income tax, there'll be a grocery credit. So this is a new credit. And whatever that fiscal note is, you know, $20, $30 million, I think that's the area we're looking into. $20, $30 million, that's a reduction in revenue because we're adding an additional credit. So we could lower the rate on sales tax below this 4.4, but we need to leave it at a point where it actually generates about $20 to $30 million to make up for the loss in the income tax rate. I mean, in the income tax credit. So,
So you take it out of the general school fund here, $20 million, but you have $20 million that's
In the
new money
in the general
that
fund.
you're able to move
yeah,
into
that's exactly
to
right.
offset.
So you're saying that if you didn't have this credit, the sales tax rate would lower further?
Yeah, probably down to that 4.35 that we were looking at.
Oh, okay. So, but you're making it revenue neutral
That's correct.
only through this adjusting the sales tax?
Yes.
Okay.
Do we know how many bills with sales tax exemption are going to pass this year?
I don't know if we funded anything, except the thing that we did fund is the bill, Senator Adams' bill for the refineries for Tier 3 fuels.
Because there was a lot of other ideas that came through the
Yeah.
revenue and tax that suggested that there may be hundreds of millions of dollars that we lose in sales tax exemption.
No, we're not doing that.
Okay.
Does this, how do you counter then criticism your opponents would use that you're now the tax and spend party?
It's revenue neutral. It's broadening the base, it's creating a better structure for the system going forward. It's not as much as I would like to done from the start, but I think it's a really good first step towards meeting the needs that we have for broader-based, better structured tax system.
Is the online sales tax likely to pass this year? It did not go anywhere in the House Committee. Does that hurt what you're trying to accomplish here?
Well, that actually doesn't generate any revenue. But we obviously support it very strongly here in the Senate, because we feel like we need to continue to put pressure on Washington to act. So, there probably is going to be determined by the courts whether what we're trying to do in SB 110 is whether that's going to be viable or not. But I think the main issue here is we're trying to continue to keep the pressure on Washington to actually do what they need to do to really solve this problem, and which I believe is truly a Commerce Clause issue. It's obviously crossing state lines, and that's obvious a Commerce Clause issue which Congress would need to correct. But I think we'll continue to broaden the base through these variable compliance agreements, which our tax commission has entered into with some online retailers. And I think that maybe at the end of the day we won't need any legislation. We'll have these VCAs.
What about the alcohol bill sponsored by Senator Wilson, or Senator Stevenson and Representative Wilson, that did not get a hearing? It's not on the board for a hearing today. Is it just going to go straight to the board? Aren't hearings done today?
Yeah, they are.
Okay, so is there a plan to just go ahead and?
Well, we normally do that with a House bill here in the Senate, especially on the last couple days of the session. So.
If it's a prioritized bill in the House, which it will be.
When do you expect it'll hit the floor for debate?
I don't know. I haven't had that discussion with the House.
Is that a fiscal note?
Yeah, positive.
Positive.
And
So it's a must pass.
Probably hit tomorrow.
will there be the opportunity for a joint hearing on this tax reform bill, the sales tax bill?
We're doing that tomorrow night.
Oh, you are? Okay.
Yeah.
It's on the schedule for 6:30 tomorrow night.
Joint committee, is it?
Yes.
Mhm. Senate and the House.
What was the thinking there? Is that to make it more available to the public, to have it in the evening, or?
Yeah, absolutely. And to have both, so we don't have to have two committee hearings. Both can hear it at the same time and recommend it to their respective bodies.
I know this was a pretty arduous process behind the scenes. I saw you
Arduous.
on the dais Friday with the sponsor. It's kind of entertaining to watch, being able to hear. I'm wondering though,
You thought they weren't watching, didn't you?
They always have their head down when I look up there.
always watching. I'm wondering, there's criticism that this just really is too rushed at this point. It is major tax policy change. I know the House Democrats put out a release to that effect, that this deserves a lot more public discussion and needs to be weighed against other options. But you're doing it Tuesday night before the Thursday midnight adjournment in committee.
Well, my argument to that is we've known for years that we probably shouldn't have done what we did in 2007. It's just clear to us, while those two revenue streams grow in almost in conjunction with each other during good times and bad times, there's a significant separation. Food continues to as a stable revenue stream, but furniture and cars goes way down. And this is what funds our social service programs. And so we have deeper cuts into those programs as a result. And the way that we're proposing this with the grocery tax increase is, the grocery tax credit, what we do essentially with that is we're targeting that for those who really need help in buying food and paying the sales tax on food, but those who can more afford it will be paying for it. But they'll also get a benefit from the lower rate going down to 4.4%.
But to Lisa's question about the process and the fact that you're doing this with 3 days left in the legislative session, should you be moving this quickly with such a major piece of legislation?
Well, it's an important piece of legislation that we need to get in place as soon as possible. All these issues, these big issues, tax reform in 2007, it came together on the last 4 days of the session. I was a sponsor, I know that we had that.
So it was after 2 years of process leading up to that.
Yeah, but you know, that was on income tax. Maybe sales tax was dumped in my bill at the last minute. Sales tax back off of food. There was a credit for mining. It was the omnibus tax bill back then. And that all came together just like it's being done this year. Senator Adams?
Maybe somebody can do the research for me. I haven't looked at it, but I just thought of it. I know the Senate has passed the sales tax off of food through the entire body at least once, maybe twice, and maybe more than that. So to say that this is done in the last minute, we've been talking about this since we took it off because there was an unintended consequence. The theory was good to try to help the low-income families, but the unintended consequence that we didn't realize was the destabilization of our sales tax. And the state gets very little income tax, very little property tax. The income tax is dedicated to education. We run our state on a very volatile tax, and that is the sales tax. And when we took the sales tax off of food, we caused what we call, and many people talk about it, but it happens occasionally when we pass legislation, an unintended consequence of destabilization. We've had the Tax Review Commission look at it. I think in 2009 when it came back, I heard it was a 2-year report from the Tax Review Commission, and they recommended very, very adamantly that we put the sales tax back on food, and they have a lot of data, and it goes back into the 2009 era showing the negative impact that taking the sales tax off of food had on the low-income population, to exactly what the President said. So if I could say this is at least back to 2009, so how many years is that? 8 years, 8 years of work on it. We think that maybe perhaps that the stars have aligned and the House is seeing maybe what we've seen as a Senate. And I don't think it's anything new. I think to say it's new would be a total misnomer.
And the reality is a lot of these big rock issues really come together at the end of the session because of the pressure of Thursday night, midnight deadline. And that's what forces us to really make the tough decisions. And we've been working on this quite a bit. I understand that the public maybe is wondering what we're doing exactly, but we've been talking about this the whole session, the restoration of the food base. And quite frankly, as I see what we're doing here, what we should have done in 2007 is not touched sales tax, reduced that, and just gave that population a grocery credit. That had not even crossed my mind back then, and it's a model that Idaho uses, and we could have reduced the tax decrease in the income tax, which was about 180 million. We could have made it 155 million and gave that credit back then and left the base, and that's my opinion what we should have done.
People would say the same thing though about income tax, wouldn't they? I mean, there have been studies showing more than $1 billion has been taken out of the public education system in the state because of the income tax reduction, and yet, there's lots of talk about that, but there wasn't even the political will to look at income tax.
Yeah,
To do
because-
something on income tax
Yeah,
assessment.
well, I don't know where they get the $1 billion. The fiscal note on income tax reform in 2007 was about 180 million. And actually, the charts showed that that would be reduced over time because of additional economic activity. And I think, you know, I don't think anybody's done a substantive study of that, but our economy is doing well with compared to a lot of other states, and I think it's because we lowered our marginal rate from 6.9% to 5%. Because it's a tax on productivity.
But remember one thing that we've also done, it's not a 5% flat tax or 4.95, it's really a 3.8 effective rate, because we still continue to allow exemptions and everything else in there. So we're not getting the money that was originally proposed to grow because of the fact that we've given exemptions that have kept it from being at that 5%.
But I almost I would argue that there has been some growth, and that fiscal note in that first year has been minimized somewhat over time because of economic activity. But we just couldn't get there in trying to create a more stable base. Those credits were important to the middle class. There would have been a huge increase in the middle class back in 2007. You know, good policy, politically difficult to do, is almost impossible to do.
This might be down in the weeds a little bit, but if I understand what you're doing right, you're gonna increase the you're gonna bring the sales tax on food back, which will increase your sales tax base, and you're giving credits out of the income tax, so you're reducing the education fund, increasing general fund. You think that's the right way to go? I mean, the concern has been, we don't have enough money for schools, and now we're gonna be giving rebates out of the education fund.
It does have a little of an effect of making the situation in the income tax maybe not by narrowing the base, but it's completely overcome and more by at least 5 times, about 5 times, maybe even more. Maybe if I'm thinking about the fiscal impact, so you take a $20-30 million versus $200 million base restructure in the, you know, it's worth it to us to do it that way, politically even, because the whole system is more stable as a result. And the whole system is what we're looking at, because, you know, we have the ability to move higher ed in and out of the education fund, and now we'll be able to fund more higher ed in the general fund because it's more stable and it's broader. And that way, public ed continues to get what they would be projected to get out of the education fund.
What does the earned income tax credit do to the general fund?
This is the grocery credit.
Right, but I'm asking about the other piece of this package.
Well, that's actually going to be run separately.
Oh.
It came out of it's Westwood's bill.
It's going to stay
It's going
like
to stay
that?
a separate bill, and or at least I can't guarantee anything, but at least the thought is that we'd keep that separately. It passed out of the Rev and Tax Committee in the Senate. Aren't you on Rev and Tax?
Yes, I wasn't able to do that.
Oh, okay, all right. I just wondered if you knew, but that passed out, I think, on Friday on a
I think that's right.
4-1-3 vote. So that's going to go forward on a separate, just like the gas tax is going to go on separately, and we'll deal with those on a separate basis.
But doesn't the earned income tax credit have that same impact that we're talking about with grocery?
Yeah, it has a similar impact, but it's really narrowly crafted to deal with those with intergenerational poverty.
Yeah. Have you ever, I can't think of a time where there's been a joint hearing on a bill. Has there been one?
There has been. The Legislative Research and General Counsel has given us at least 2 other occasions when that happened, and I can't remember what they were.
We'll follow up with Rick Lopez.
Yeah. All right.
The bill, I'm sorry, you may have covered this already, but we're expecting the bill by the end of the day.
Yeah, well, it might be numbered in the morning. There's a question?
All the questions that were asked were answered already.
Okay. Thanks, everyone. See you tomorrow.
Thank you.